Well, good morning. And so good to see all of you here this morning. Give me just a second if you don't mind. They say you live and die by technology. I'm dying right now, so give me just a second. I'm sorry. We may be really in for a treat today if I can't get this. There we go. Okay, I think. All right. It's so good to be here. It's so good that I have my phone, because I think it's on my phone as well. Like Dave said, my name is Jack Smith, and I'm from Winter Haven, born and raised. About 1990, I went off to college. That's when I was at Grace. Went off to college, felt God calling me to ministry. Left from there, actually with a couple that were my age. We all went to what is now the Baptist University of Florida. I think that's the name. Buff for short. Not me, obviously, but the school. But it was Florida Baptist Theological College back then. That was too much for us to say, so they had to shorten it to Baptist College of Florida, then University of Florida. So that's up in Graceville, up in the Panhandle. So if you can imagine, any of you that think maybe Winter Haven was a small town or is a small town, sorry to tell you, Graceville had about 3,000 people total in the whole town, not the college. College had about 600 students. Probably another half of that was probably faculty and staff. So it was a small town. It was a real culture shock leaving here, going there. And so when we would come home to visit my family, met my wife there. I forgot to tell you that part. We got married, and then we came back to Winter Haven after graduation and started serving some churches in the area here. But it's been a long journey, but I did want to share that Dave has been an instrumental part of my life. He doesn't even probably know this, but when I was at Grace, I hadn't been drinking, so trust me. I'm just, a little off balance there. But if you've ever struggled with God leading you to do something, especially something as big in your life as being called to ministry, it's really tough to kind of figure out, is this me thinking this, or is this God thinking, God leading me this way? And so Dave, and he may not remember, but he was a big part of my life in that time. I loved Pastor Bruce that was there. He was the senior pastor, but we didn't have the same relationship that Dave and I had. So Dave was there for me and helped guide me through that. And so Dave, I thank you for that. Didn't realize you were sitting right there till just now. So this is going to be fun. I'm going to read off my phone. I'm going to wear my glasses. But whenever I come to preach at a church, especially in pulpit supply or interim fill-in capacity, I always like to ask the Lord, what is it you would have me share with these people at this time? Because I know this may be, obviously I'm going to be here for 3 weeks, Lord willing. Depends how today goes, right? But you may not want me coming back. That was a joke, sorry. But I want to leave you with something that if this was the last time I ever saw you, what would I want to tell you? What would I have the Lord tell me to tell you? And so this week, God really laid on my heart for these 3 weeks to share the Great Commission. And share the Great Commission in light of the current situation in our world and in our society. Because I firmly believe the Great Commission, even though it was given 2,000 plus years ago, it's still applicable for today. Nothing has changed as far as God's concerned that changes the fact that we're still called to reach those here in Winter Haven, here in Polk County, and to the other parts of the earth. So as we look at that passage this morning, I'd like to draw your attention to Matthew 28. And we're going to look at just the first 2 verses today. Okay, we've got 3 weeks to unpack this. So as I looked at the first 2 verses, there was a little phrase that just stuck out to me. And boy, it was beating me up. Because now, some of you may not know, the church contacted me, maybe a couple months ago, to reserve these dates to come speak. So I've had time. Thought that'd be a good thing, but it's almost worse because I had more time to think about it. And the more I thought about it, the more I wanted to share. And it's like, okay, Lord, I've only got, 3 hours to share with them this morning. So how much am I going to, I'm just kidding. But I can't share everything that is brought to my mind. So I had to whittle it down, bring it down to something that you could take into your heart, into your minds, and then out the door with you as you go this week. So let's look at that passage, and then maybe this will start to make sense. Starting in verse 16 of Matthew 28. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. And when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given. Oh, boy. Oh, there we go. Okay. Given to me. I'm so sorry. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. Now, if you've been in church any amount of time, this is no new revelation to you. This is no new passage. Oh, I never saw that one before. I'm sure you've read it many times. You've heard it preached many, many times. But there was something that stuck out to me. I'm just going to be honest with you. I never saw this before. Let's go back to verse 16 and 17. In verse 17, it says, when they saw him, talking about the disciples, when they saw Jesus, they worshipped him, but some doubted. But some doubted. What? These are the same guys that have been with him for 3 years. They've seen him raise people from the dead. They've seen him do miraculous healings. They've seen him answer questions from the religious leaders that nobody really should know, somebody his age and his lack of education. They have followed him and they have given their whole life to him. But yet now that he has hung on the cross, he's died, he was buried, he rose again, and he went to a place. He told them before he died, after I'm resurrected, we're going to meet in Galilee. Okay, so that was all told to them beforehand. They get there, they begin to worship, but some of them doubted. So I thought, man, what kind of, what are these guys thinking? But then as I started thinking more about some doubt, I was going around for days but some doubted. Some, just mulling that over in my mind. And God revealed to me that I'm no different than those disciples. We are no different. We all doubt God from time to time, or we doubt situations in our life that he has led us to, and we doubt and we start to wonder, is this really of God, or is and I'll be honest, sometimes people, am I following Christ? Is this really what I need to do? Because I'm not so sure. And so we doubt. So I want to look at the idea of doubt. Today my message is entitled, Our Bout with Doubt. You know what a bout is? Okay. Our struggle, our fight with doubt. So, the first point that I see in this passage and in my studying of Scripture, the first thing that we see is that we are all capable of times of doubt. The disciples, despite their uncertainty, recognized the divine presence before them. You see, it says they worshiped, but yet some doubted. And I don't think those that doubted, I don't think you had the 11 and maybe 6 were worshiping and 5 were going. I don't think that's the case at all. I think that the entire group was worshiping, but in their mind, I think some of them were like, I'm not sure about this. I'm not sure what is, if you could imagine following Jesus for the disciples, it was like at every turn there was something new and exciting and sometimes probably frightening, as he just was killed for what he believed, but now he rose again. I'm not so sure I can continue on in this journey that he's got us with. They had several days there when he was in the tomb. They probably started to think, okay, well, that was a good run. Didn't end like we thought. Now what am I going to do? Well, I guess I could get my fishing nets back, or I could start collecting taxes again, or whatever it may be that the disciples did before they became the disciples. they may have already started their mind in that time frame. It reminds me of a time in my life. I have a business in town, and I've operated that business almost 20 years. I actually picked it up when I was church planting. Then it got to a point where it was a full-time position. Well, then I met with a friend of mine who offered me a different position to close my business, go to work as a financial advisor for a financial firm here in town. Well, I did that about 3 years. I found out I'm not the salesperson I thought I was. You know, in my business, there's a need for what I'm doing, and people know that, and I don't really have to sell them a whole lot. But when it comes to, sure, Mr. Jones, I'd like for you to sign over your entire 401k and let me take care of it for you, you know. I wasn't that good at that. So after 3 years of that, the company came to me and said, thank you for playing, but we're taking our toys and you need to go home. So I was faced with, now what do I do? Kind of like the disciples probably were like, okay, wait, this has been my whole life. It's kind of weird that it was 3 years just like the disciples. I don't know. I didn't make that up. It just happened that way. They're faced with, now what do we do now? So they probably started in their mind gearing towards what the future holds. Well, then all of a sudden, they get the news, hey, Jesus wants to meet with us in Galilee. So that may be why they were doubting. There may be reasons in your life why you sometimes doubt, or you fight the urge to doubt what God is doing. I don't want to get ahead of my notes because then we'll all be in trouble. In Jude, so we all struggle with doubt from time to time. It may not be very often for a lot of us, but some of us it may be every day. I don't know. But in Jude, there's a passage and it talks about those who doubt. And I'll just bring it down to the important part of that passage for me today. It says, have mercy on those who doubt. You see, the Bible doesn't say, if you doubt, you're out. Jesus has never been that way. Think about in your life and in my life, how many times, you know, we talk about God as the God of second chances and third chances and fourth and fifth, and it keeps going. God always forgives, and he always lets us start anew. Doubt is not one of those unforgivable sins that if you doubt, you're out. If you doubt, well, let me just read this. Philip Yancey, a very popular author, Christian author, says, doubt is the skeleton in the closet of faith. And I know no better way to treat a skeleton than to bring it into the open and expose it for what it is. Not something to hide or fear, but a hard structure on which living tissue may grow. You see, doubt can be used for positive things. It can be the starting point to something stronger and greater with God. I think you're probably thinking about one of the disciples that kind of had the doubt in his name, right? We'll talk about him in a minute. Many of us, though, may say, I don't know what you're talking about. I've been a believer for 20, 30, 50 years. I don't have a problem with doubt. I've got to the point where I trust God in everything that happens. If you're in that position, God love you because that's amazing. But I don't know if you're like me and you struggle from time to time with doubt. You say, well, I don't struggle with doubt, but maybe you struggle with one of these things. Maybe you struggle with worry or fear. I know when I was younger, I didn't worry about anything. Well, I may have worried about some things, but it wasn't about big things. I was worried about, is that girl going to go out with me? Or, am I going to pass this class in college? Or what it may be. But as I get older, I have to fight the constant fear of worrying about the big things in life, about my health, about the future of our country, about the political climate in our country. Here's a new one for you. What's a new one for me? So like I said, my son's here. He's almost 17. But I've got 2 older daughters. And they're both married. And they're both out of the house. I thought when they got out of the house, I was good. No. Now it comes, well, Dad, our car won't start. Or our this and that in our house won't work. And now the new thing is, One of my daughters just gave birth to a baby girl, and she's got an older, he's 2.5, a boy. Well, now I'm worried about how things are going to work for them now financially, or how it's going to work with her staying home with the babies. And so you see, I can see where worry could never end. Well, it could end the day you're in a box here in the front of the church and they're all coming to pay their last respects. But other than that, I could see where worry and fear is just a continual thing. And I look at worry and fear as a doubt. You're doubting that God will take care of you, or that he can take care of you, or he will meet your needs, or he will work those situations out. At least for me, that's the way I equate it. Because I could and it's funny, I say wake up in the morning. It always happens to me in the middle of the night. Some of you that are like me and you're older, you have to get up in the middle of the night to do certain things, right? Well, that's when my mind starts working. Man, how is everything keeping afloat? How am I even affording this house and the electric and the this? And it's weird. The things hit me in the middle of the night when I can't do anything about it anyway, and it's dark and everybody's asleep. I can't talk to anybody about it. That's when that fear and that worry hits me the most, is the middle of the night. I don't know if you're like me. Maybe you're not. But maybe it's not worry and fear. Maybe it's getting ahead of God. Maybe it's, and I've been guilty of this even in ministry. I want to do things so badly for God that I get ahead of what he's leading me to do. And they may all be good things, but they're not, at that point, God things. They're things that maybe he'll have me do later, but they're things that I've thought of on my own, and I think, well, they must be of God because they're all good things. And God's like, no, wait a minute, slow down a minute. That'll come in time, but right now, I want you to do this. That to me is doubt, because I'm thinking, I can handle this. God, I love you and you love me. If I need you, I'll call you. Instead of saying, no, wait, God, what do you have for me today? What do you have for me in the next hour? I mean, if it has to come down to that. What about the next 10 minutes? What are you leading me to do, God? Not me leading and hopefully you can catch up with me. I'm guilty of that. If you're not, then just put that one aside. Like I said earlier, and I may have touched on this, but your finances. Worried about your finances. Or, I can handle my finances just fine. I'll give my money to the church, what I see fit, and the rest of it, I'll do what I want. Well, the way I look at it, God owns it all. He only asks for a portion of it back, but that doesn't mean the rest of it, we can go play lotto tickets or whatever it may be. I think God has plans for all of your money, and the cool thing is a lot of it is things you're going to spend it on anyway, but there's some things out there that you may not even thought about that he wants you to be a blessing to other people in your finances, in your time, and in your life. But when we take our finances into our own account, I think we're doubting God. We're saying, God, I can handle this. You got your 10% or 12 or whatever it is you give, but I got the rest of it. Don't try to tell me what to do with it. Now, we would never say that to God, but I think in our actions, sometimes we're really saying that to God. You got your 10, leave me alone. Sounds terrible to say that, but a lot of times our actions, that's really what we're saying. What about your ministry to others? In your ministry to others, we all have a job to do to share God's love with those in our path. Now, I think it's amazing. I was so filled with joy when I saw, well, not the passage, I like that passage, but I saw on your screen that shows the information before church that you're going out and you're praying for local schools and the students and the teachers. And I think that is amazing. That is showing that you love and you care about things outside of these four walls. You care about the community. You want to see them be successful, but at the same time you want to share with them God's love and God's forgiveness. And I think that's amazing. It shows that you have a heart for people and for missions. Now, I want to jump back just a second because there's a passage that I did not cover that I think is most important. because it's not what I got to say, but it's what God is saying to us. Matthew 6:26 says, "Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns." You've probably heard this one before. "And yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they?" Talking about God providing for us. I've heard this my whole life, but it's still, there's times in my life where I start to worry about whether I'm going to be taken care of, where my needs are going to be met. My necessities will be met. But I need to remember, God has never let me down in 57 years, so why would I worry now? I just need to keep remembering that. Our second point, I've only got 3, so don't worry, we're almost there, is that our doubt can be a time of growing. And that's what I talked about earlier, when the doubt in your life can be something that can be turned into something good. It can be a catalyst for change. Jesus doesn't condemn the doubters. He commissions them, all of them, even those unsure. Maybe their doubts were released once they experienced the risen Christ. I don't know. I mean, it just says, and some doubted. It didn't give us a timeline of, yeah, but once they were there an hour, they kind of let go of their doubt and they were fully trusting. It doesn't say that. It goes from, they began to worship and some doubted. And then, and I picture, because Jesus to me, and obviously I've never met him personally, physically. I wasn't around 2,000 years ago. Some of you younger people may think that guy's old enough, but I'm not. But I just picture Jesus going, yeah, okay. And in his mind, I know that some of these are doubting what's going on and the call I have for them, but whatever. We're gonna move forward with this, and they're going to work through their doubt as they work through the ministry I have for them. It's been the story of my life. I feel God leading me to do something. I'm not really sure how it's going to work out, but God told me long ago, if you're going to, I think about like in student ministry, when I was in student ministry, I felt the importance, if I'm going to do a youth event, and in my mind I want 100 kids to show up, well then you better plan as though 100 kids are showing up. So I would plan, I'd buy enough pizza and Oreos and all that kind of stuff for 100 kids. And I'll be darned if 100 or almost 100 kids didn't show up. Sometimes more than that, but it was always around that number. But if I planned for about 20, guess how many I had? 20, 15, 30. It's something about trusting that God has put this in your heart or in your mind, and you got to plan towards it. You got to plan towards that goal, and he meets that goal. He reaches that goal. Now I could have said, okay, Lord, let's have 1,000. I mean, that's not what I felt like God was telling me. He would kind of reveal to me, okay, you're doing this event, it's a lock-in. Last time you had 80 kids. I think this time you could have 100. And so, I mean, it's not just some pie-in-the-sky crazy dream. It was all calculated with faith involved as well. But I've seen how that works in my life. So God takes that doubt and that fear, because it's really fearful. I don't know if you've ever done something like that where you don't know how many people are going to show up, but you buy enough pizzas for 100 kids, and then 10 show up, and then your church is like, why did you buy 100 pizzas? Or, not 100, but enough for 100 people. So there's some fear and some stress involved. And thank God that more times than not, God met that. He met that goal that I had felt like was set there before us. So it can be a time of growing. And I know that's a very simplified illustration, because sometimes it's not a youth event. Sometimes it's, doctor says I got cancer. I don't know how he's going to heal this or solve this. And sometimes, obviously, he doesn't, other than taking you to eternity. But sometimes we're faced with serious stuff, and our doubts can be a time of growing. If you've ever, this is another simple illustration, but maybe it'll help my point. If you've ever been involved in maybe teaching a Sunday school class, or working in vacation Bible school, leading worship, or preaching in front of people, it's amazing how that fear or that worry or that sense of overwhelming causes you to study more, to get prepared, to become a better teacher or leader in that position that you have. And then through that, you're growing. I can tell you, there are things about me preparing this message that I learned I didn't know. So it was through that time of, I want to prepare to share with these people, that God revealed things to me. So God can take our doubt, whether it be a doubt in our finances or whatever the things I just mentioned, and he can use that to grow us, because then we go, okay, Lord, I'm not sure how you're going to meet this need, but I'm going to trust you. And lo and behold, somewhere down the line, he either meets the need, or he heals us, or he takes us home, whatever the situation may be, but he meets us where we are, and he helps us. I've always thought, too, it'd be a great idea, because we have so many things that God does in our life, but our minds just we can't really, especially as I get older, can't remember them all. I've always thought it would be good to keep a journal. Keeping journals are great, period, but if you had one that had tabs and like say, how God answered my financial needs, how God answered my physical needs, or I prayed for my neighbors or my church members to be healed, how God, and then keep just kind of a log of how God has met our needs and answered our prayers, because we seem to forget. Like I said, God has provided, and I'm not starving to death. God has provided for me for 57 years, so why would I wake up tomorrow and be stressed about, well, is God going to meet my needs? Am I going to be able to pay the electric bill this month? Or am I going to be able to pay, whatever surprise bill comes along? He's done it for this long. Why would he stop now? But we seem to forget. But I believe that our doubt can be a time of growing. Corinthians 4, 8 through 10. I love this passage. I've heard it many years, but I'll tell you the first time I heard it in just a second. But it says, but we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed. Always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be manifested in our bodies. See, we are afflicted in every way. There's just no way of getting around it. Some of us have certain afflictions that others don't, but we all have something that we're struggling with, whether it's physical, mental, financial, attitude, emotional, whatever it may be. But I heard this verse for the first time back in the 90s, I think it was. There was a Christian band called Jars of Clay. And so then I saw that this was kind of like their theme verse, the We Are Jars of Clay. I thought, what? So I saw that's actually in the Bible. I thought they were just trying to be cool with their name. It's actually a part of the Bible. But then I saw later this thought. It's not a quote. It's just I wrote this down, but it kind of encapsulates the importance of the jars of clay terminology. It says, it is through the cracked surface of these clay pots, us, that God shines so bright, that he can be seen and not us. And I've seen that before, where somebody will take a broken pot and they'll glue it back together and then maybe put a light inside or some sort of design. I think sometimes I've seen them the cracks filled with gold coloring, maybe not real gold, but then when you look at it, what do you see? You see the gold filling in the cracks and not the broken pieces necessarily. But if you took that same pot and you put a light inside and the light shines out, your first thought is, oh, look at the light shining out of that thing. You might even may not even realize it's a broken pot, but yet God uses us that way. Our cracks and our brokenness can be used for his love and his light to shine through. So I would encourage you, even though we're all afflicted, we have afflictions in every way, don't look at those as negative. God wants to use those for the positive. So when we doubt, let God take that and allow him to use that as a time of growing in our life. The devotional writer Selwyn Hughes wrote this, and this is a quotation. I didn't come up with this. Those who doubt most and yet strive to overcome their doubts, turn out to be some of Christ's strongest disciples. I remember in college, I was talking about Bible college earlier. Well, as in any college, you meet people of all different walks of life. And I met several guys that were, because the college I went to primarily was for men who were called to ministry later in life. And even though I was a younger student at that time, there were guys that were older than me that had been through a lot. There were bikers with the tats all over, and and still wore the leather vest. And these guys were in Bible college. There were guys who had a lifestyle similar to that, but they didn't look that way. They've come through a lot. We sang All Hail King Jesus. Took me back to the time I had a good friend, Todd Campbell. He was majoring in music as a worship leader. And we would sing, I was in a band with him, and we would sing All Hail King Jesus. He kind of, snapped it up to almost kind of a contemporary sound. But man, that song has stuck with me all these years, even past. Todd had a rough past. Todd overcame that temporarily. Todd and his wife died of cancer. This was years after college. He had moved on, went back to Oklahoma. He was worship pastor. His dad was a pastor. Well, Todd had a rough go of it. He lost his wife, and Todd got back into doing drugs. And so Todd overdosed, and Todd passed away. But so every time I hear that song, I think of Todd, though, and I think about the fire that was in his heart because of what God had brought him through. And I think about Jake was the biker dude I was telling you about. Jake was brought out of that whole biker scene, and God used him in a mighty way. Those guys were so changed that they were bold. They didn't care what people thought. They were going to tell others about Jesus. That's what we have with Thomas. Remember the doubting guy, the disciple? Doubting Thomas, we always give it kind of a negative thing, right? Oh, that guy, he didn't trust God. He didn't trust Jesus. No, he did, but it took him a while to get there. He had to see the scars and the wound in the side, but once he did that, he was sold out for Jesus. He was actually the first recorded person in the Bible to call Jesus God. He was the first one to do that. Once he saw that and his mind was made up that this is the real deal, there was no stopping him. Actually, there was no stopping him. That the best we know, the best we can determine by the records we have, he also went the furthest into the world spreading the news of Jesus. He took his doubt and it changed his life for the better, and he did amazing things for God and for Jesus, for the cause of Christianity. Now, and I will say this, and this will come out through the next couple of weeks, they all did. Jesus took them where they were. Like I said, he didn't rebuke them for, you're doubting, you're out of here. I'll take the 5 that aren't doubting and I'll use them. He took them where they were. He said, here's your assignment, go do it. And I believe as they went out and they did the call that God had on their life, they worked through those doubts. Because they all, I guess I'm going to give it away now. You guys know it anyway. They all wound up dying, except for one, for their belief and then their ministry in Jesus. So they took what they had learned and what they had experienced and what God had done in their life all the way to their death. And they let it be the reason that they were killed. That's believing pretty heavily. I mean, I don't know how many of us would die for our faith. I hope we all would. But, they certainly did. God uses us in spite of our doubt, just like he did the disciples. That's my last point. Number 3, Jesus didn't say, once you're absolutely certain to the core, then you can go and spread the gospel. He didn't say anything like that. He said, here's what I want you to do. Go do it. Jesus doesn't turn away the doubters. He includes them in his mission. And it's exciting to me. Like I said, I see your church doing things outside of this property for the Lord, and that's exciting because that's what he has called us to do. I remember years ago, there was an evangelism tool called Evangelism Explosion. And I was on staff at a church, and the lead pastor there was like, all my staff are going to be trained in this. And then so we were trained in it. And then he said, okay, now they're having a leadership training where you go be trained to be a leader. And he wanted myself and my wife to go. This was it was near Nashville. He wanted us to go up there and be trained for a week on how to lead. Well, guess what? I was just the week before trained on how to actually memorize the whole spiel. It was a whole long spiel. Anybody ever heard of it? The Baptists had a thing called CWT, similar, continuing witness training. Long, huge thing you had to kind of memorize and know, because it took you from the first time you meet somebody, maybe through all of their objections, all of their questions, and hopefully lead them to the Lord. So I got certified to actually be able to do Evangelism Explosion. The very next week, we're driving to Nashville to be leaders. I hadn't really had this thing memorized. I was kind of fumbling through it. So we went up. Now, what they do, the first night we're there, all right, we're going to go out and we're going to share our Evangelism Explosion in the world. You're going to go to a laundromat. You're just going to strike up a conversation with somebody. These are some people who had visited our church because it was held in a church, and I want you to go visit them and share with them. And let's see, where else did we go? I can't remember, but you can imagine you walk into a laundromat, which hadn't been in laundromats very often, so I went in and there were some people that, they were down on their luck, and I'm supposed to just strike up a conversation and start telling them about Jesus. It was pretty tough, but I'll tell you this, the people were open and receptive to it. I got past that whole fear and doubt, and we did it, and to be honest, I can't remember. I don't think we actually led anybody to the Lord in the laundromat, not the group that I was in, but there were some, because, there were several laundromats in this town. So you can imagine the fear and the nervousness that's going to come, but you got to work through that. And to me, that's all doubt. I mean, it's whether you're doubting yourself or you're doubting, Jesus, are you really in this? I mean, this is kind of bold and crazy, but we did it, and God reached people. So I think Jesus will use us in spite of our doubts, and he'll work through those. I hope we never I've preached in some churches. I've been a member of some churches in college that it was all about what happens right here this hour of the week. The rest of the week they could care less. They were not interested, by their actions, they were not interested in reaching people for Jesus. I spoke with my neighbor in college, and I told him, because he was familiar with that kind of mentality in churches, and I said, I said something to this effect. I said, it's almost like we're a bunch of happy plastic people under shiny plastic steeples. And he thought that was kind of funny, because it's true, but that's kind of catchy. And I actually it was kind of a play on words from a secular band called REM that was around back then, and they had the Shiny Happy People song. Anyway, but I said it's applicable to the church. Here's these churches, they're not wanting to do anything for the Lord. They just want to meet together and feel good about themselves and that kind of thing. Well, interestingly enough, about 10, 15 years later, I'm listening to, I don't know if it's Joy FM or what station it was, and here's this song comes on the radio. It's called Stained Glass Masquerade. And that phrase is in the song, and I'm like, wait a minute. Of course, I knew the lead singer, Mark Hall, was my neighbor in college. I'm like, he took that from me. And it took me a while to remember that time, but I thought it was kind of cool, Now, did he intentionally steal it? I think he just, the Bible talks about there's nothing new under the sun. Everything, is rehashed from, so I don't care. I think it's wonderful if it works for him. Rick Warren, the former pastor of Saddleback, he's since retired, he used to say about people preaching his sermons, he said, if my bullets fit your gun, shoot them. I don't care if you use my sermons. I think it's a wonderful thing. We all have the same goal, and that is to reach people for Christ. And that's what Parkland's goal should be, and I think it is, and that's what every other church in town, whether they're Baptist, Methodist, Lutheran, Presbyterian, we should all be about reaching others for Christ. So may God bless you on your path, and may he guide you through moments of both uncertainty and doubt, because it's through those times that he's going to grow you, and he'll grow the church. Now, I know typically when I come to share in a church, especially a church who maybe is currently looking for a pastor, most people in that congregation at that time have a relationship with Christ, because it seems like it's the time that the attendance gets a little low, and it's just really the truly devoted ones that are sticking it out until they get a new guy up here as the permanent pastor. So I say all this with that in mind. But maybe you're here this morning and you've had doubt in your mind. Maybe it's doubt about Christ. I come to church because my wife wanted me to come to church, or my husband wanted me to come. I've never really bought into all this. But here I am today, and I need to do something about that. So maybe that's you. Maybe you're here for the first time. I don't know any of you. I don't know how many of you are members or visitors, but maybe you're here, today's your first time in church, and you have doubts and questions, and you're not really sure about Christianity, but you want to know more about that. Well, I would be glad to pray with you. I'm sure Pastor Dave or others, members of the church, will be glad to pray with you, talk with you about it, give you some materials, some information about how you can know better. You can know more about what it's like to follow Christ. Maybe you're just here today and you've been a Christian for many years, but you struggle with doubt. I'd be glad to pray with you. So as Dave and the worship team come, I'll be down front. Be glad to pray with you. Be glad to talk to you. I know you don't know me from anybody, but I'm here if someone needs. I'd be glad to share with them.